Hey, Mike, you ready to do a Chesterton podcast?
Sure. That sounds like a wonderful idea.
Who's that paradoxical fellow who loves cheese?
GK Chesterton.
Who writes 1,000 essays and likes to stare at leaves?
GK Chesterton.
That's right, it's
GK Chesterton. GK Chesterton. GK Chesterton. GK.
You're listening to another episode of Chesterton's Gateway with Ethan, Nicolle and Michael Grumbine, special guest Doug Tennerpel, and me, AI Chesterton. Tremendous.
H.G. Wells, albeit slowly and gently.
GK Chesterton. GK Chesterton.
So
All right, hey, Mike,
what did he write? Not a
you
student
ready to
of
launch
C.S.
into our
Lewis, no.
Chesterton podcast?
I'm ready. I love the music. Has put me in the mood.
All right, well, we're doing something weird. Most people, they do their first episode a normal, so you kind of set the tone for how the show's normally going to be. We're going jumping right into a special guest episode. And here's our special guest, Mr. Doug Tennerpel, the man who got me into Chesterton.
Yeah.
We got each other into Chesterton.
Yeah, we kind of like we both kind of kept talking about it, and then suddenly we both like, maybe we should actually read Chesterton.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. I'm Doug Tennerpel. I'm
Right.
the creator of Earthworm Jim, the Neverhood, Cat Scratch. And Ethan and I wrote and worked on 150 episodes of VeggieTales for Netflix and DreamWorks.
That's all right.
However, we've been best friends for like forever.
Yeah, Doug was my best man at my wedding.
25 years we've known each other.
I don't know
And,
where else he would be my best man. But
and our friendship created a Chesterton reading group.
the legendary
This was the first
Southern
one?
California. Yep, at Doug's house.
Very nice.
And it all started with I kept showing up at Doug's house whenever, because I moved to California to start hanging out with, to get into the animation industry. Doug was kind of mentoring me and like, you got to move down here, man. But the other thing that I loved about being down here is there's kind of all these exiled artists who were really into C.S. Lewis, Chesterton, apologetics, stuff like that we knew through Doug. We like to get together, smoke cigars, and I had started reading Chesterton, and I knew that I loved it, but I really needed to help. I needed to discuss it. I needed to process it. So I had proposed this Chesterton group a couple times. I kept showing up at Doug's house with these photocopies of Chesterton. Very shyly. You guys know me in real life. I'm a pretty shy guy. And I think it was around maybe the third or fourth time we all got together. We've actually got it out and did it. And I can't remember how it actually started, that we just started doing it every single week. But it's remained one of my favorite things. It's up there in one of my most favorite things in life. We now have a second Chesterton group because Doug's now in Nashville. I'm out in Rancho Cucamonga. And Michael has joined our second group in the Inland Empire area. And Michael is our resident just expert on all things history, church history. He knows his Tolkien. He knows his Chesterton. He's a super Catholic with 9 kids. He's started schools. He's been a teacher. What else? What other credentials you got? He's also very humble.
I was going to say, you still don't talk much in the Chesterton group.
No,
so
I take it in.
It's amazing to me. You founded these things, and then you're the quietest one. Or
I like to surround myself with smart people that talk a lot.
And I like surrounding myself with quiet people, which is why Ethan and I got along so well.
Maybe
All my
that's
friends are like bookworm, shy guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. I mean, I've read Chesterton for a long time, from just a literature perspective, but I've never been part of a group like this, and it is a real pleasure. The fraternity and the ability to dig into Chesterton and just sort of absorb. He's so rich. We were reading last night, Everlasting Man, one of chapter 6, I think, and he's incredible. He's deserving of many podcasts. I don't know if he's deserving of as much music as we're about to unload on everyone. But
I'm doing a new Chesterton theme song every week, guys. So we're gonna, this is the first one.
I hope you started with the worst, because that was pretty bad.
It was the worst. It's only uphill from here.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, I don't know. The hip hop one. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to talk about it.
Yeah, we have to pretend like this is our very first time doing this podcast. We did do a test pilot. Once Doug said he'd do it, and he said he wanted to do this, I said, like, well, it's the first episode. All right, we'll redo the first episode. Let's do it.
That's
So
all right.
maybe just kind of a quick jump in on why are we, what makes Chesterton special? I mean, why there's a lot of authors you could do a book group around. It almost feels cultish sometimes to say we read this one author's writings every week. But what is it? What makes us? I mean, I can say for one thing, I think a lot of authors you could read their whole body of work maybe in a year or two, and you'd keep going around and around. Chesterton has so much content that I even asked. I was hanging out with Dale Ahlquist, the president of the Chesterton Society, or Chesterton Organi, or whatever it's called now, and asked him, "Have you read all of Chesterton?" Because I mean, that's like his job, basically. He's like paid to read Chesterton. And he said, "I've probably read more than anybody else, but even he had still not gotten to the end of all there is to read of Chesterton's work." We're talking 100 books, 1,000 essays, something like that, or 5,000 essays.
It's 11,000 essays.
Oh, holy crap! You know your stuff.
Not even close. Plays, you can't find the bottom of them, and Ahlquist is the king.
He digs them up, like he's digging up stuff that's not even out there. Like there's the stuff that's online, but that's not everything, right?
Right.
And as Ahlquist puts it, this is a guy who wrote 11,000 essays, each one of them a masterpiece. So there's a consistency to him. He never wrote a bad essay. And they're truer today than when he wrote them 100 years ago.
I think that's
spooky.
the biggest thing, right? How true it is as things are today.
So, and on that note, do you think it's truer today because the errors he was fighting against were coming around circle again? Because that's what we find sometimes. Is it more that, or is it more that the sense of wonder is still a need that he has about the world? If you had to sort of weigh the two, because is it the errors that he's fighting, or is it what he brings, the positive stuff he brings?
Well, we're going to do tremendous trifles today, and that we'll tell you everything you need to know about that. But I do think that the errors are the same, and I think they actually predate his time. I think they were coming to a head in the early 1900s, which is what really animated, I think, Tolkien, and Lewis, is they were seeing modernity come up in a way that it had not come up before. But I would trace all of it all the way back to the early pagans, which is man's only sin. We're going to talk about that in tremendous trifles. Man's only sin, and there's a hubris and a pride that comes with the industrial age and technology and pro-science that I think came to a head because of the 1850s with Darwin. It gave, as Dawkins calls it, he became a intellectually satisfied or fulfilled atheist. I think it gave it a special gas in the engine, and there probably was not enough of a Christian church to fight it. It was weakening, certainly in England and now in America. So that might explain why now we look at it and we go, here's a great defender of our cause. And I think Lewis and Tolkien are in the same way. They have a lot of traction, more traction now than they had when they came out.
Yes, that's definitely true. Yes, and I agree with you about what was happening in the 1800s and the rise of Darwin. I see him and also guys at the same time like Marx. I see them as and Engels. I see them as products of an earlier philosophic drop off of a cliff, starting with Descartes, going through Locke, Hume, the empiricists, going through Hegel, the destruction of actual philosophy, which underpins all other thought. So scientific thought is underpinned by philosophy, and then so when you kill right philosophy, then everything else starts to fall off a cliff. And so I see Marx in politics and Darwin in science as examples of that. But you're right, Chesterton was seeing the fruits, the evil fruits of that, and fighting against it in the early 1900s.
Yeah, so I think both are really true. I mean, he's tapping into stuff that's always true. I mean, there's the stuff about humans needing to have wonder in our lives, to humble ourselves before things that are so obvious to us, to be more like a kid and stuff but he says it so profoundly. Things that sound like a Hallmark card, he just he managed to write in such a profound way and make it so real. And then, yeah, I think that I also agree that I think that we're seeing the things play out that he's talking about so much that we're in a different place in history, but he also talks about everything in a timeless way, so that it's always, he thinks timelessly, I think is one thing that makes him so powerful.
He's
So,
an interpreter, an interpreter, in that there's truths in his heart that he's talking about, but he does it in a very in a way that everyone can grasp. He's brilliant, but he's not an intellectual.
Right. I think that's also it. I mean, I know for me personally, finding out that he was a cartoonist, an illustrator, failed a dropout. He didn't. I don't think he went to school for. I don't know. Yeah, he went to art school, and then this is so funny to me. He thinks like an artist. He thinks like a common man. Like he doesn't try to be a. The thing is that he can joust with the best of the intellectuals, but he doesn't actually want to be one of them. And
he was best friends with George Bernard Shaw,
right? Who he almost couldn't be more opposite in philosophy
and body type.
And they're loving each other shows something also very human about him. That he loved men and he loved people, loved his wife,
no homo,
loved children. There's a love. It feels like he loves me when I read him.
Yeah,
right.
There's a love there that, and he really could have punched above his weight on the philosophy. And he does go toe to toe with George Bernard Shaw when they debate, and it's very jolly. It's just not, you go to the Lincoln Douglas debates, and it's like heady and brainy and legal and all that, and nothing. Although Lincoln had a way of communicating with people too, but Chesterton more so, just very pedestrian in his writing and his talks. And then it's just, and in a way, when you have the truth and you have genius, you don't have to flex. You just want to communicate with as many people as possible.
Right. He loves, like you said, he loves people. And now, having said all that, I feel it's only fair to say there is a reason why almost no one gets through his most famous work, Orthodoxy, on the first try. Because although he is a common man, he's no in the clouds intellectual, though he, like you say, Ethan, he can joust with them and win most of the time. He is from a culture and a literary tradition which is very rich. And so his language is one, it feels like he's weaving a tapestry of words around you when you read him.
Right.
At least that's for me. That's the case. And sometimes you have to reread sentences because he does speak in long sentences often. And so you have to figure out the cadence. And so this is one of the reasons that I love the idea when you proposed the Chesterton podcast, is because he's worth going through paragraph by paragraph and not just, I could read Hegel. I mean, I wouldn't want to because
what a slog.
Yeah, it's a slog. But you can read a few paragraphs of Hegel and you can summarize what he's saying in a sentence. Chesterton deals with ideas that are so, he weaves in so many ideas that oftentimes it's worth talking about. A few sentences of his are worth talking about for a while. So anyway.
Right. And that's why he's one of the most quoted. There's kind of two things about Chesterton. You've probably heard him quoted. He's one of the most quoted authors out there. And yet he doesn't have his Lord of the Rings or his Narnia or his one big book. He never made like a magnum opus. The closest thing would either be The Man Who Was Thursday or Orthodoxy, which I would consider Orthodoxy a masterpiece.
Yeah, that's the greatest book I've ever read.
Yeah.
The second time was the greatest book I ever
read. Right. Yeah, the second or third time for me. And that's why we want to make this show, because we wanted to share that experience we get at Chestertonians. That's what we do. We read it aloud, go in a circle, and discuss it. And I also really wanted to make something, because every Chesterton podcast is usually a couple of real smart guys just talking about Chesterton themes and stuff. I wanted to actually get into the text, read it, and comment on it, and I wanted to basically create a library of whatever essay you're reading at the time. You search our archives. Maybe we've done it. You can go back. And especially since Chesterton makes so many references to things from his time, or maybe that are a lot more obscure nowadays. Michael somehow knows all these things. Most people don't. But
I don't know all of them. I use
you
Google
figure
like
it out.
everybody else. But,
You're good at faking, like you know it all.
I do know some.
Anyway, so basically creating that sort of reference system for people to go back to a library. So anyway, let's kick it off. So to do this, we decided we are we're embracing some AI here because, and I would probably not want to do an AI voice reading our book to us, like just a cheesy one, but I was able to take the one recording on YouTube of G.K. Chesterton's real voice, which is kind of a treat to me. Like I get this chills when I see video or hears, because I'm such a fan of this guy. I would love to sit down and talk to him. And this is all there is, right, that we have. And so I put this into AI and created a voice that is basically Chesterton's voice, reading it to us. And there's something very fun about it. So I haven't introduced you, Doug, yet. This is AI Chesterton.
Oh, is that famed homophobe and graphic novelist Doug TenNapel? Very well, then.
Thank you, GK. Thank you, Gilbert.
I actually had to kind of speed it up a little bit and make it a little clearer, because he talks very slow, and his accent's even thicker when he's yeah. So anyway, that's AI Chesterton. So what are we reading today, AI?
Tremendous Trifles from the book of the same name, published in 1909.
And I should mention, so we're always going to be going through a book chapter by chapter. To start this podcast off, this podcast is based off a book that I put together called Chesterton's Gateway, because I kept getting asked by people, what should I read first? And I kept kind of giving this list that I'd come up with off the top of my head of like, oh, read this essay and this essay, because reading orthodoxy off the bat is a bad idea. But if you read some of his best essays, because he's really a master essayist, that's the best way in. But you got to read the right ones. You read some of those obscure, weird ones, you're going to be really good. So finally, I just, I'll make a PDF. And then the PDF was so good, I was like, I'm going to make this into a book. And so then I was like, the book's so good, I'll make a podcast. So the podcast is Chesterton's Gateway. And the first book we're going through is my book, Chesterton's Gateway, in the order of the chapters. We're probably going to skip the chapters that are from orthodoxy, because we're going to do orthodoxy all by itself, probably next. So anyway, so we're on chapter 1 of both Chesterton's Gateway and Tremendous Trifles. And I know it's confusing, but Tremendous Trifles' first chapter is called Tremendous Trifles. It is the introduction to the book. Ready, guys? You got your Chester belts all buckled up?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, the first chapter is kind of a long one.
Once upon a time, there were 2 little boys who lived chiefly in the front garden, because their villa was a model one. The front garden was about the same size as the dinner table. It consisted of 4 strips of gravel, a square of turf with some mysterious pieces of cork standing up in the middle, and 1 flower bed with a row of red daisies. One morning, while they were at play in these romantic grounds, a passing individual, probably the milkman, leaned over the railing and engaged them in philosophical conversation. The boys, whom we will call Paul and Peter, were at least sharply interested in his remarks. For the milkman, who was, I need say, a fairy, did his duty in that state of life by offering them, in the regulation manner, anything that they chose to ask for. And Paul closed with the offer with a business-like abruptness, explaining that he had long wished to be a giant, that he might stride across continents and oceans and visit Niagara or the Himalayas in an afternoon dinner stroll. The milkman, producing a wand from his breast pocket, waved it in a hurried and perfunctory manner, and in an instant, the model villa with its front garden was like a tiny doll's house at Paul's colossal feet. He went striding away with his head above the clouds to visit Niagara and the Himalayas. But when he came to the Himalayas, he found they were quite small and silly looking, like the little cork rockery in the garden. And when he found Niagara, it was no bigger than the tap turned on in the bathroom. He wandered round the world for several minutes trying to find something really large and finding everything small, till in sheer boredom he lay down on 4 or 5 prairies and fell asleep. Unfortunately, his head was just outside the hut of an intellectual backwoodsman, who came out of it at that moment with an axe in one hand and a book of neo-Catholic philosophy in the other. The man looked at the book, and then at the giant, and then at the book again. And in the book it said, it can be maintained that the evil of pride consists in being out of proportion to the universe. So the backwoodsman put down his book, took his axe, and working 8 hours a day for about a week, cut the giant's head off, and there was an end of him.
From the milkman to the giant.
We start our first podcast with violence. I love it.
Straight into the
brilliant.
head chopping. I mean, it's fitting for me, I think.
Yeah.
So the milkman engaged them in philosophical conversation.
As
He
one
proceeded
should with a
say,
milkman.
"What do you wish for? You want to wish?" That's the philosophical conversation. What's your wish? Is that what that means?
One presumes that there's other philosophy going on before that. Probably. I love the idea of a milkman with a wand in his pocket. That's fantastic. And the whole idea of the stranger being a fairy. This is a theme tapped into by Tolkien, by Lewis, by all the George MacDonald, by all the writers. Morris, etc. There's a real. He's in a literary tradition where the world of fairy and the world of man and the world of God are like three paths, and they interweave, they walk over each other. And so the fact that there's a story of a milkman as a fairy is awesome. I'm with Paul in that story a lot when I read it a lot of times. Like I understand we want to zoom out. Like this is a thing that happens. People are fascinated by pictures from space of the Earth and seeing everything that's massive. Our world at a glance. We seem to have this proclivity to want to almost be God in that way. So to zoom out. But we're unfit for it, right? Because once we do, we also want things to be grand. We want the Niagara Falls to be worthwhile. We want the Himalayas to take our breath away, and you remove your ability to do that when you zoom out too far and you become a giant.
And if you want to become a giant, sort of in the sense of becoming a celebrity or something, you really are making people so small that you're removing yourself from the common street corner or pub or wherever you can go and meet real people. And we all think we want that, but I don't think anybody. I mean, we want if all that life is really your relationship to God and the people in your life. So nothing could mess that up like being, celebrity, I think, or being crazy rich, or at least make it much more challenging.
It's a universal truth that when you get your wish and you're big, or when you get rich, right, you lose a sense of scale. It's going to that philosophy of you're out of size with your universe.
Yep.
And things don't taste as good, or you need more. And that's that. I love that desire. He keeps it in there. He goes, he still wanted something big. He was looking for something big, even though he was bigger. That's a universal truth. There's other little backflip things that he writes it like he throws it away. But that, what you started with, Michael, on a philosopher, they're going to talk philosophy, and now he's ripping on philosophers by the first thing he asks is, what's your wish? Because usually a philosopher's all high-minded, and he's like, he wants to give them he'd give them anything they want, is a great summary of philosophers, which at his time, it's a commentary, and it's a throwaway line. Another one that I love is, when he found Niagara, it was no bigger than the tap turned on in the bathroom. Bathroom is something crass. And so he lowers that image even further by putting it in a bathroom. He could have described anything. And he's always a perfect wordsmith.
He really is. I like how he highlights the danger too of being large. It isn't just that the danger to your desires, but ultimately there's a danger to you. I mean, you see this with celebrity, as we mentioned, where they get what everyone says or everyone talks about wanting. They get fame, they get money, they get people that act like they're their friends, and then there's hardly a demographic more likely to die of drug overdose or suicide of one kind or another, or to be involved in just horrible tableaus than the celebrity class, because it turns out that the woodsman, the neo-Catholic woodsman with the axe, is always there. So,
Intellectual neo-Catholic.
Yes.
That's another one.
Would we get into that thing?
A woodsman, yeah, a guy in the country. This is a man of the country that you normally wouldn't think of it as an intellectual. And Chesterton, again, is just twisting it by making him an intellectual. And he has this neo-Catholic, which, neo-Catholic is not a widespread term.
no,
Right. This is kind of specific to the time. I think, Michael, I remember you talked about this. Can you kind of expand on that a bit?
Yeah, at this time there's a resurgence back to try to return to the scholastic worldview, probably the height of which was Thomas Aquinas, but the neo-Catholic movement, like the neo-Gothic movement in architecture at the time, which was also was a kind of miniature Renaissance. It was trying to return to the good that was in the past. But the twist that they gave, the neo-Catholic twist, was that Aquinas wrote a lot. Okay, if you want to try to take your life lessons from the Summa Theologica, it's going to be you're going to be like a few years in the making before you can get to. So the idea behind neo-Catholic philosophy was, okay, let's distill these great works down to some aphorisms that we can just be practical about. And Chesterton's poking fun at
very
this.
modernist, very modernist, right?
Yeah. Like, let's get the AI summary of this book versus reading the book. And
that sounds. Can I just say that sounds to me like when a church nowadays goes, "Oh, the kids are really into these days. Like, we want to bring the church back to this culture, but we got to do what the culture's doing in order to get to them, right?" Like, I don't know if that's the same thing, but it's because that still sounds so modernist, the way of thinking. Let's make what's the most efficient way to get this done.
Right, and this is the age in which efficiency is worshipped. Like, this is
right. That's the thing.
Cusp of the industrial age, where assembly lines been created, where everyone's about doing things in the most efficient, like even in war, how to kill people the most efficient way possible. The rise of the machine gun and mustard gas and all kinds of other stuff. And so it's if it comes to efficiency in thought, let's distill like reams of wisdom down to it can be maintained that the evil of pride consists in being out of proportion to the universe. All right, this thing in front of me is out of proportion to the universe. It must be taken care of. So I love how he goes back to his axe. It's not like he still returns to the simple solution.
Yeah. He looks at his book. That's something I never understood. I didn't quite catch that. He looks at his book. He looks at is it the giant he looks at?
Yeah, back in the giant, and then
looks at the giant. Looks at his book. Now, for Chesterton to hang on that moment, I know it's comedic.
I think he's being comedic.
What does it mean? Yeah. What did he? Is it what? Did he get the direction?
Well, I think the neo-Catholic philosophy that he's poking fun at, this is a simple man, right? This is not a philosopher who hears the phrase in the book and instantly applies it. He's like, yeah, and you can almost see the workings of his mind. The evil of pride consists in being out of proportion to the world. Okay, and I've got this head here, and it says the evil of pride. So he's identifying. It's just the slow identification of the sin of pride in Paul, which is interesting because it is a kind of pride. But it takes him a while, it takes him a minute to click.
He's like Axe Cop looking at his list of bad guys going, "Oh, yeah, he's on here." And he chops his head off.
Yep.
Yeah. So he's considering the book of philosophy or his woodsman way, which would be to cut its head off. Is that the choice that he's making? Then he puts the book down and he goes and cuts his head off like a woodsman would do.
Right. It's almost a
how-to thing.
Yeah, the neo-Catholic philosophy book is a how-to manual. That was the funny thing about it, was instead of being philosophy where you would read and try to distill wisdom over a number of years of study, it was like, here's your how-to manual on how to be, how to have the wonderful truths of philosophy at your fingertips. And so you walk around almost like an almanac from the same period of time, the 1800s and 1900s. And here's the wisdom distilled down into a sentence. And then, but then you got to apply it. There's a joke here, much too long, about the virtue of prudence being the most difficult virtue, because it requires applying eternal truths to practical situations. And that's what makes it. That's why the Romans held it to be the highest of the four cardinal virtues, and the Christian tradition, that's the same.
And it calls him an intellectual.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And he speaks like an intellectual. He looked at the book, and the book said it can be maintained that the evil of pride consists in being out of proportion to the universe, which is not
Right.
how Chesterton writes.
No, not at all. No, and I like what your words. It called it a backflip. So the phrase, he was an intellectual backwoodsman. There's a backflip there. So a backwoodsman is someone who's not intellectual. A backwoodsman is someone who's separated from civilization and civilized thought and lives in the backwoods, about which there are many redneck jokes in our culture, etc. But and Chesterton had parallels in his culture of the time. But he's an intellectual backwoodsman. So he's this little paradox at once. So it's a great thing.
Well, let's keep it going here.
All right.
You guys are cool with that.
Such is the severe yet salutary history of Paul, but Peter, oddly enough, made exactly the opposite request. He said he had long wished to be a pygmy about half an inch high, and of course he immediately became one. When the transformation was over, he found himself in the midst of an immense plain, covered with a tall green jungle, and above which, at intervals, rose strange trees, each with a head like the sun in symbolic pictures, with gigantic rays of silver and a huge heart of gold. Toward the middle of this prairie stood up a mountain of such romantic and impossible shape, yet of such stony height and dominance, that it looked like some incident of the end of the world. And, far away, on the faint horizon, he could see the line of another forest, taller and yet more mystical, of a terrible crimson color, like a forest on fire forever. He set out on his adventures across that colored plain, and he has not come to the end of it yet.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Chesterton's he's gonna comment on Peter in that regard, and call himself a Peter a little later on. I love how he describes this, what he started out at the beginning of his essay, calling some mysterious pieces of cork standing in the middle of the flower bed. And now those some mysterious pieces of cork is toward the middle of this prairie stood up a mountain of such romantic and impossible shape, yet of such stony height and dominance that it looked like some incident of the end of the world. I think of like why people love climbing sheer cliffs. You have in Yosemite, I just went blank on the name of that huge curved surface. It's like a sheer rock cliff that rises up out of the forest, and people practice their rock climbing skills on. Now I should have looked it up before my podcast, but anyway, Al Half Dome, that's what it's called. So there's something that we like, the walls of cork, these weird cork pieces in the middle of the garden, become this massive thing. There's this something epic in the micro and parts of the small of the world, and if you can draw that epic nature out of the micro, out of the small things in life, it seems that was intended by our Creator as well, not just the appreciation of the macro, of the thing which is physically huge.
Yeah, the Creator does not want us to try to be big. He tells us to be weak in our weakness, and foolishness is always used to confound the wise. The small, David is the youngest child, ends up being the king. The younger son and the prodigal son is the one who returns and becomes the one that the father is the one that obviously turns God on the most, the repentant small man. And then there's, by him not ever coming to the end of it, that is like a direction for how to live your life forever, is what Chesterton is saying. You'll never find the end of it if you're small.
That's right.
And the one who's big, he found his end pretty quick.
That's right.
It didn't take long, did it?
Let's keep it going.
Such is the story of Peter and Paul, which contains all the highest qualities of a modern fairy tale, including that of being wholly unfit for children. And indeed, the motive with which I have introduced it is not childish, but rather full of subtlety and reaction. It is, in fact, the almost desperate motive of excusing or palliating the pages that follow. Peter and Paul are the two primary influences upon European literature today, and I may be permitted to put my own preference in its most favorable shape, even if I can only do it by what little girls call telling a story.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get into this. Yeah, what are the two philosophies? I don't know if there's anything that.
Well, the first
get into
sentence,
here.
I will say one thing about the first sentence, which is, such is the story of Peter Paul, which contains all the highest qualities of a modern fairy tale, including that of being wholly unfit for children. This
I love
is
that line.
in mid-1930s when Tolkien published The Hobbit and was roundly criticized by his fellow Oxford dons for being publishing such trifles, non-serious stuff, when he was this world-class Anglo-Saxon scholar. And his translation of Beowulf is still one of the two best in the world. And he responded by writing an essay, my favorite essay of his, called On Fairy Stories, which he turned into a small book. And because he rewrote it, and then he proceeded to deliver it as a lecture to snub his fellow dons because he was so. And in the middle of this, what he says is, it's been a mistake to leave fairy stories as, or make them into a thing that are for children. Fairy stories are actually, they can be for children, but properly speaking, they're for all of us. They're for adults, actually, because their lessons are very adult, and the way they touch on the hidden world is something that we need to pay attention to. And Tolkien was, like Chesterton, very not a great fan of the industrialized form of that society had taken in the last 100 years before that. So anyway, that reminded me of his On Fairy Stories.
To say the least, I'll go into C.S. Lewis too, who had a similar experience where he was all high-minded and brilliant and did his first book on miracles, and it was destroyed by his contemporaries, intellectuals. And they say, according to Michael Ward in Planet Narnia, that was what inspired him to do the quote-unquote children's book of Narnia. These guys all talk about sleeping past those watchful giants, the dragons, sneaking past them to get to the children's imagination before it's destroyed by being hollowed out. And even Chesterton here in that last paragraph, he's being humble, but he's saying it's a fairy tale. And it's small, that last sentence, even if I can only do it by what little girls call telling a story. He's very dismissive of this thing. And yet we're reading it 100 years later and we're three adult men.
A good point.
All right, I'll keep it moving.
I need scarcely say that I am the pygmy. The only excuse for the scraps that follow is that they show what can be achieved with a commonplace existence and the sacred spectacles of exaggeration. The other great literary theory, that which is roughly represented in England by Mr. Rudyard Kipling, is that we moderns are to regain the primal zest by sprawling all over the world, growing used to travel and geographical variety, being at home everywhere. That is, being at home nowhere. Let it be granted that a man in a frock coat is a heart-rending sight, and the two alternative methods still remain. Mr. Kipling's school advises us to go to Central Africa in order to find a man without a frock coat. The school to which I belong suggests that we should stare steadily at the man until we see the man inside the frock coat. If we stare at him long enough, he may even be moved to take off his coat to us. And that is a far greater compliment than his taking off his hat.
You know what he's referring to, right? So in that time, if a man
I know what hats are.
Yeah, if a man takes off his frock coat, he's going to fight you. So if you stare at it, Chesterton saying he's staring at him so long, the man takes offense and removes his frock coat, which is indeed a very silly thing.
I never got that out of that.
I never got that either.
The frock coat was a really sort of frilly affair with the black coat and the frocks, but then the laces coming off often and very rather effeminate, if I do say so myself. But it was the style of the time, and it was also ridiculous, and which Chesterton is making fun of. But he says if you stare at him long enough, you will encounter the real man, and he'll take off his coat.
He'll take it off. Yeah, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and he loves the fight over the mere tipping of a hat of fake manners, and we know that
getting rid of that. Yeah,
from you did all the study, Ethan, on Ball and the Cross. Talk about the fight,
right? And that's the whole book's about. He loves that. That whole book's about a atheist and a Catholic Highlander, Scottish and an Irish guy, deciding they want to have a duel to the death. Will we do that one, Michael? I don't know. Will we do that? Will we get to that one? I don't know if we'll do we might have to attack his fiction differently. I would love to, though, because it's trippy. That's the thing,
and it's modern manners, fake manners that keep them from fighting, and they want to have it out.
Yeah, it turns it into a crime. The fact that they want to be real with each other, have a real philosophical fight, and their modern culture could not handle that. It's a big chase. The cops are chasing all around. Anyway,
I hope we do it, but like you said, we'll have to do it a little differently, probably.
Yeah, it's insane. It is insane.
Yeah, well, AI may be better by then. I can do like a full-on audio. Like some kind of audio theater.
In a couple months, we'll be able to make a film of it using AI.
Just generate a whole movie.
Generate the whole thing. And the other thing he mentions, Rudyard Kipling, which was the big thing that you'll see in art, culture, and food and everything. This fascination with other lands, exotic, Egypt, Africa, and Kipling is this world adventurer. Mark Twain, world adventurer. Roosevelt, world adventurer, because it's like they're too big, for their own yard. And most people hold up Kipling as some kind of a literary hero, and he just destroys him.
Right. Yeah. And listeners will probably know Kipling because he was the original author of the Jungle Book. But he also did this poem, White Man's Burden, where he talks about, he was very much a creature of his time, but I like what you were saying, Doug, about
he's a great writer.
Oh, he is. He's an excellent writer. It's his thought that's the problem. And like you said, I see it as a natural arc. We had finally got the technology where we could explore the ends of the earth, right? So this is the age following the age of the exploration of the poles, still going on at that time. People could travel to these other continents and come back and tell about. They weren't lost forever. Most of the time, anyway, they weren't lost forever. And so the life of the adventurer who could bestride the world was a thing which was actually possible, and people were testing it. And Kipling was doing so in his books and in his articles that he would write as well. And so, yeah, and Chesterton is no fan of that. He's saying, well, as we said with Paul, that there's a number of inherent dangers in this. And if you want to really know the truth, you experience the world. How about focusing on the man in front of you? And maybe focusing so much that the man wants to fight you. But I grew up in LA, so I do know the danger of staring at someone too long who's a stranger. It was a thing you learned in high school not to do.
Yeah, and I think also when you're traveling the world, you're seeing everybody. You're seeing the whole world in their frock coats, right? They're in there. Whoever they've got on what they've put on to be seen by the common stranger in the street. You're not going to get beneath that. He's saying you want to see the real world, go to the depths of what this world really is, who your fellow man really is. If you want them to take off their coat, you need to stay there. You need to dig in. I forgot that I actually broke that paragraph up because it's so I'll just keep it going, finish this paragraph off.
In other words, we may, by fixing our attention almost fiercely on the facts actually before us, force them to turn into adventures, force them to give up their meaning and fulfill their mysterious purpose. The purpose of the Kipling literature is to show how many extraordinary things a man may see if he is active and strides from continent to continent, like the giant in my tale. But the object of my school is to show how many extraordinary things even a lazy and ordinary man may see, if he can spur himself to the single activity of seeing. For this purpose, I have taken the laziest person of my acquaintance, that is myself, and made an idle diary of such odd things as I have fallen over by accident in walking in a very limited area at a very indolent pace. If anyone says that these are very small affairs talked about in very big language, I can only gracefully compliment him upon seeing the joke. If anyone says that I am making mountains out of molehills, I confess with pride that it is so. I can imagine no more successful and productive form of manufacture than that of making mountains out of molehills. But I would add this not unimportant fact, that molehills are mountains. One has only to become a pygmy like Peter to discover that.
Like the little things that AI adds. He's like, but he does a little sigh there.
It's pretty good. Like I have to say, the intonation, everything. I mean, he misses some, like the emphasis on that should have been the mountain. The molehills are mountains. This is
right.
The emphasis on the right syllable. But it's really impressive what AI can do there. Yeah, and I like. I'll say one thing about that paragraph. He's taking a dig at the industrial age by saying, I can imagine no more successful and productive form of manufacture than that of making mountains out of molehills. So the key words successful, productive, and manufacture were like propaganda words for the industrial age. Like, this is what they were doing. They were bringing progress by bringing business success in business by being productive and manufacturing things. And so he's pointing out, if you really want something worthwhile, make mountains out of molehills. If you really want to manufacture something, people should be paying attention to. So anyway, as always, Chesterton he takes his dig, like every paragraph. He digs at, which is why I asked the question at the beginning, which is more true, that Chesterton's relevance comes from his sense of wonder and the rekindling of that, or how he's taking down errors that have remained or to this day, or sometimes are resurfacing today. He's good at both.
He sees something universal. I always think of the opening of the Lord of the Rings movie, where Galadriel says about man, his key problem is pride. Like the reason why he fell with the rings, and she has this real disdain in her voice, is pride. And so it's a universal truth. I think Chesterton's on safe ground saying this stuff. And I don't think he invented it. I think he discovered what is already true. And that's why they read true. And then he goes and backfills all these examples. And I think it's a wise thing. And to me, the reason why I like this essay is, to me, it's the summa of all of Chesterton's thought. I think it really is his core. When the opening song talked about he liked talking about leaves. Well, he liked talking about
staring at leaves, yeah.
Staring at leaves, because he was reawakening his childlike wonder, seeing them for the first time. Or a cow, he describes as just being like an alien from another planet, an amazing animal, I think, in orthodoxy. Because he's trying to open up your sense of wonder at everything you see. And we just dismiss, we're not thankful enough to God for the miracle of simple things. And we're ready to go on an adventure. We want more and more and more and more and more. And, that whatever that mound is that can be described as a mountain or a molehill, the mound doesn't change. The two, Peter and Paul, are what chose to change.
Yep.
And so you should be content in your yard. There's a lot of adventure that Kipling missed in his own backyard, of people around him, and adventures, and the idea that it's in defense. I think also with the backwoodsman, there's a defense of the simple life and the small life and the country life, and being comfortable in your own skin.
Right, and I like what you said there, that there's an adventure in your backyard. See, Chesterton isn't actually inveighing against the idea of seeking adventure. What he's saying is, you have adventure around you. You don't need to stride across continents.
And Chesterton did stride across continents.
He himself did. Yeah.
He traveled the world, so he's talking about an attitude, and he's using that as an example.
Yeah, he's not necessarily saying it's bad to travel. He's saying don't fool yourself and think that you're making yourself getting a deeper understanding of mankind and humanity by doing this, just sort of bouncing from one country to the next. You're getting the surface level of everything. You're not really digging in.
And we know in hindsight now what Kipling discovered by going to the Congo or to another country. We have scientists that looked in your backyard through microbiology and found cell structures and DNA strands. And there's a universe in the small that could go on forever. So the idea that you just have to go out and be big. And Chesterton's talking about getting in your backyard and seeing blades of grass anew, that's much more where I think science's future is actually going to keep going smaller. is an adventure.
And we haven't found the end of it. Yeah.
No, and they're not, especially with the quantum world, they're not going to. It's an interesting.
I mean,
interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
My very first time reading Chesterton, I think it was in Heretics, and he was my first time reading Chesterton talking about wondering at all the small things around you. And I remember I'm like in my 20s, close, late 20s, and I actually like picked a leaf up and started staring at it. He got me to look at these things are all around me all the time, and just to suddenly go like, I haven't stopped and thought about how crazy a leaf is for a while, and maybe never.
There's what I was asked recently, what's my favorite besides Lord of the Rings, what's my favorite Tolkien work? And I included the Silmarillion in the Lord of the Rings, but my answer was Leaf by Nicolle. So here's a work where instead of Tolkien taking,
that sounds like a rap song.
Yeah, that's right. Nicolle. So
the word's the same, niggling.
So there's but he wrote that in a weekend. So he takes 50 years to write Lord of the Rings, and he writes this book in a weekend, and it's about an artist who spends his life painting, but as he goes on and later, he has all these issues that he has to then deal with later on in the book. But the primary supposition of the book, the conceit, is that there's an artist who has focused so much that he's on this tree that he's painting, that he's gone down to the micro, and he spent most of the last years painting one leaf. And so there's that. And interestingly, although he's criticized for some of his actions later on in the book about that, he is also given props for his work on the leaf by a divine force. So anyway, it's really interesting book, but the focus on the one leaf is actually a thing. Like you can get there. You can go down. When I play with my kids in the garden, my wife's a wonderful gardener. That's I mean, we love to just sit and stare at the small things that are
your 9 children attacking you in a garden. You just
they aren't all the same age.
It's their Catholic. Catholic dodecatuplets.
Yeah, is that what that'd be? What would that be called?
That's right.
They're all born 12 months apart. But on the big versus small, Chesterton, in another, I think it was in Orthodoxy, where he says that he describes a sunset or sunrise, and he says maybe it's just God. Science is trying to get its head around the universe and everything, and he says maybe God just sees it like a child and goes, "Do that again."
Do it again. Do it
Yeah,
again.
it's Orthodoxy.
Oh, I love that. Love that chapter.
Yeah. We'll get there, guys.
Yeah, we'll get there.
All right, final paragraph. Ready? Bring it home.
I have my doubts about all this real value in mountaineering, in getting to the top of everything and overlooking everything. Satan was the most celebrated of alpine guides when he took Jesus to the top of an exceeding high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the earth. But the joy of Satan in standing on a peak is not a joy in largeness, but a joy in beholding smallness, in the fact that all men look like insects at his feet. It is from the valley that things look large. It is from the level that things look high. I am a child of the level, and have no need of that celebrated Alpine guide. I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence cometh my help. But I will not lift up my carcass to the hills, unless it is absolutely necessary. Everything is in an attitude of mind, and at this moment I am in a comfortable attitude. I will sit still and let the marvels and the adventures settle on me like flies. There are plenty of them, I assure you. The world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder.
The way he disses himself, so like he's just like sitting there, this giant fat smelly guy with flies landing on him. That's his way of
Exactly,
explaining how
like,
he's going to absorb
what-
wonder.
What an author! In the same paragraph,
Yeah.
he can take down Satan and himself, and through the use of and then throw Psalm, I think it's Psalm 121 in there as well.
Yeah.
Lift up
And the
your
visual
eyes.
of Satan like wearing lederhosen and being this like Alpine guide guy.
Only he who-
Nicolle! Yeah.
I'm your guide.
This
Off
explains
we go.
why I never. This explains why I never liked yodeling.
I also I did not expect this, but the AI read is really funny of that one little last sentence there where he goes,
Yeah.
there are plenty of them, I assure you. He just like throws it away small.
Did it quick. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
funny.
it was good.
It's good stuff, and it is. I love how he's talking. I mean, he doubles down on the whole "don't be a giant" thing. I mean, he ties it right to Satan, which is about as bad as he
right
can
to
go.
That's why the head gets cut off.
Yeah. The title of "Celebrated Alpine Guide." I've never thought of that as Satan, but this is Chesterton. He can give you all kinds of images.
I like it.
It's a fantastic finish too. The world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for the want of wonder.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's one of his famous quotes, of many.
Yeah, I think I have coasters with that on it.
Mhm.
I have GK Chesterton. I have coasters with all these GK Chesterton phrases. So
Yeah.
So that want of wonder is a big theme of his. I see it throughout all
Yep.
of his work, or a recapturing of that wonder. And in a jaded age where everyone's like, oh, cell phones, and I'm, even being a 58-year-old man, oftentimes you get apathetic and jaded
Mhm.
and kind of, well, what am I going to do now? This house sucks. My country sucks. LA sucks. Job, work sucks. Politics suck. Everything, Netflix sucks. And you're looking for the big picture, and there is a sense that it's like right in front of you in your backyard. It's just outside of your periphery.
I mean, there is that wisdom. Like nowadays, it's a Gen Z thing to say now, which go touch grass. But it's a real returning to that sort of Chestertonian wisdom. If you want to not be bored with the world and lose your head to a intellectual backwoodsman, then go and touch grass. Go and pick up the leaf like you did, Ethan. Go.
Oh, they're not talking about like weed.
Well,
Maybe.
I mean, I guess they could nowadays they would read Chesterton that way. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
They did the Tolkien too in the 60s. They're like, it's a drug trip.
I
I'm
mean,
like,
well,
"No,
yeah,
shut up, you
Peter
idiot."
Jackson even put that as a joke in from the mouth of Saruman criticizing Gandalf in the Fellowship of the Ring. But
Which weed,
yeah, the
Shire weed.
A lot of
halflings and-
Chesterton's fiction feels like a drug trip. A lot of the, some of it does.
his
for sure.
his poetry does,
Yeah.
and I have to admit, naturally I'm more of the philosophic mind bent.
Mhm.
Although I debate sometimes between the mythological bent and the philosophic bent, but man, his poetry, that's where I'm at. We're going to have to bring Doug back on and maybe some other guests too, because I can't. Poetry is just
Oh
too
yeah,
much.
that'd be a tough one. I have his whole book of poetry, and
It's way
I have that
outside
one.
of my field too, and it's shocking
and it's
because
huge. It's like this thick.
I own one of his published original poems they made, I think, 300 of them hardbound. It's a tiny, just 2-page book, 3-page
Wow.
book, and it's signed by him, signed and numbered. So that's my only
All right, I'm jealous.
piece of his printed thing. But I read him, and I just got done reading C.S. Lewis's poetry book that was collected and put out in 1985. Spirit God, I can't even remember its title now, but the intro to it is worth the entire book. It's half the
Huh.
book is an introduction by a Lewis scholar. And it talks about when he wrote it and everything. But I read the whole book of poetry, right? And I've read enough Chesterton poetry and Leaf by Nicolle and Tolkien's poetic works. And I don't have a taste. We don't have a developed taste for it. And clearly back then, poetry was something you'd normally publish,
Yeah, people
read.
would read it, I guess. Yeah.
Everyone got it. So it's like way beyond me what's
Lost
happening
art.
in poetry. I just can't.
Hmm.
You know. The book, by the way, on Lewis, the book of poems is it has a commentary on it too. So at the end, each poem, most of the poems, it has a few lines of who the characters are in it, because Lewis is talking about every Greek god and everything imaginable, in it. But that one was a really neat read. My daughter got me that for Christmas from 1985, I think.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
Well,
Poetry way over our head.
Yep.
I don't have a signed and numbered thing, but I have a signed Chesterton poem book. His full collection of poems. My brother got it for me, so I was
Nice.
always jealous of Doug's. I finally got my own signed Chesterton book,
That's awesome.
but it's the poems. I'm going to read it.
Yeah, that's why it was that's why it was affordable, because no one wants
Yeah,
that thing.
nobody wants that thing.
Poems.
All right, any final words on this? And next week we are going to be reading A Piece of Chalk, which happens to be the second chapter in Tremendous Trifles, but is also the second chapter in my book.
And at that
Chesterton's
point,
Gateway.
it veers off. At that point, your book does, right?
Yeah. I didn't even mean to do that. It was an accident.
Yeah. No, I love Piece of Chalk, but this one is fantastic. This is, I know why he named his whole book after this one essay, because
Right.
this
It's
is
a lifer. It's a
Yeah.
lifer. Just some backfill on it. It was written. So you said it was written in 1909. He was 35 years old at the time, just to put your age in. He
Yeah.
was a 35-year-old writing this stuff. He wrote it. They don't know if it ever was published in the newspaper, that daily paper where he got all the other poems from for the Tremendous Trifles book, which he might have written this uniquely.
Because this is an intro to the book, right?
It could be, yeah. It may not have been published outside of this book, but I just thought that was interesting. This is almost like another throwaway piece that he just put out there, and it's just rich.
Yeah. Like to him, I'm just going to write a quick intro because it's this collection of essays, and it's one of the most profound things I've ever read. And it's also, I love it as a first essay to recommend to someone who's totally new to Chesterton, because I think most people will get it when they hear it. I mean, I remember
It's
I
so
read to my
true.
dad.
And if you lived your life by it, you'd be happier, which is what I
Yep.
love about Chesterton, is if I could just follow it. It's like, reminds you of reading the Bible. It's like, if I just follow this, everything would be great. One more thing though, Michael, as a Catholic, because this is, let's see, converted to Catholicism in 1922, and this is his 1909. So it's 15 years before he's a Catholic. And I always read into it, Peter and Paul. Chesterton, as an Anglican at the time, he can't be using those names without thinking something. And Peter is the hero who wants to be small and humble, and Paul is the missionary going out and destroying the church. And he never wrote on that, but I'm just wondering if you have a theory on that.
I thought the same thing actually when I read it. I was rereading it for this. I didn't catch that the first time I read Tremendous Trifles, but for this podcast I was rereading it, I thought about that. It is true also that from the Protestant angle, they love to promote Paul, and obviously the Catholics are a little partial to Peter. So it reminds me a little bit, Doug, of the fact that when you read Orthodoxy, it feels like he's arguing for the Catholic Church, but he wasn't a Catholic at the time, and so he has. I think Chesterton in his soul is Catholic, and he just naturally trends towards that kind of thought. Having said that, High Church Anglicanism is very similar in a lot of ways. They reject Peter, but besides that, they love the liturgy, they love the beauty, they love the ritual, they love the hierarchy. They have hierarchy, and it's a thing that they do. So it's very similar, and he's swimming in the milieu the high church Anglican.
Weird couple of names to pick for being a Christian. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
well, I
Pretty
can't
weird.
deny that you're right. I think you're right that there's some meaning there. I have a and I also have to say, how did Paul die? He got his head chopped off.
Mhm.
So
Damn.
there's
I'm
there's a
telling
similar-
you, there's something there. I don't see any commentary on it. I'm just going, man, it seems like I don't think he's sloppy with words.
No, I don't think he is. He is definitely not sloppy with words. He was the man wrote so much, and he wrote, I think it was the Illustrated London News was his most prolific piece. He would do a weekly column for decades for them, which is what a lot of these come from. So,
All right, that's fun. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Anytime,
sweet.
brother.
We're
Good
doing
to see
Decent
you.
Talk, and we're gonna keep going. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Smoke a cigar, listen to some more episodes.
exactly. It's going to be a long road, people.
Chesterton's Gateway is produced by Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. It is based on the book of the same name, which can be found on that capitalist monstrosity, Amazon.com. Send questions and comments to GKCinfo at axcop.com. And join us on Patreon, where only the true Chestertonians can be found. Goodbye.
The AI is making a guy talk. I never heard this part of the song.
It's
Constellations. All right.
We've seen a saying for you
I had to whip this song together before the episode started. I didn't screen it
Good.
very well.
What a slot. Yeah, produced
I'm
by
sorry.
Ethan Nicolle, ladies and
Who's that
All right,
paradoxical fellow who loves
All right,
cheese?
guys. There we go. That's the song.
Who writes 1,000 essays and
Terrible.
likes to stare at me?
Till next time.
That's right, it's
GK Chesterton, GK Chesterton, GK Chesterton, GK Chesterton.
way too VeggieTales.
who's
for
friends
my
with
taste.
Bernard Shaw and could crush him accidentally.
GK Chesterton,
Who crushes H.G. Wells, albeit slowly and gently.
GK
Oh my God.
GK Chesterton.
So quotable. What did he write? Not a student of C.S. Lewis, no.
Why?
Stop. I just want to say, I, for one, welcome my new AI overlords.
Yeah. Good use of a tool.